There is no end to the human experience. There is no end to the human experience. There's two, when you consider everything that's going on, it's too much for your brain to process and work with and come up with any realistic information. So it's an ongoing thing. You always will encounter things, right? There's no end to awareness. It's natural for awareness to constantly expand, right? Which means what? It means you're coming up against the limits that are there, right? And then you have breakthroughs. But very often before you have the breakthrough, you have to have a breakdown. So in other words, you're experiencing the available experience that's available to you in the state of mind that you're in the state of consciousness that you're in now, and you experience that until you're up against the walls of it, you're up against the limits of it, and when you hit the limits of it, you start suffering, right? Because this is, because you don't have access to anything big enough to make this workable, right? So you have a breakdown. You have a breakdown, right? This is what happened with Eckhart Tolle. You have a breakdown. You have a mental breakdown. And then if you have a mental breakdown, what happens, we call it a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. Because when you break down, you break through the limits that were there and start to experience a bigger reality, right? And then you live in that reality for a while until you hit the limits of that, and then you have another breakdown. You don't necessarily have to have a breakdown. You may just experience, it depends on where you're at in the process. You may just experience that you're feeling that you are up against certain limitations, like that. It's like I said to the guy that I was talking to this afternoon, it's like the thing that you can count on that will always deliver the goods is that you don't know. And that's the last thing the personality is willing to experience, isn't it? And yet that's the source of power. That's the source of power. Because we take I don't know to be a weakness, right? When it's not. I don't know is power, right? Because I don't know means that you now have access to all possibilities instead of any one possibility, because I don't know. I am letting go that I know. Almost all of humanity knows, don't they? Almost all of humanity knows who they are. And almost all of humanity knows what reality is, don't they? How's that going? Yeah, because it's not true. What they know is what they believe is true. What they know is what they think is true. And even though the evidence keeps coming very consistently that that's not true, people won't give it up. People won't give it up. Must be true. Has to be true. Has to be true. Has to be true that money makes people happy. Has to be true. I don't want to give that up. If I give that up, what am I going to? Where will I go? What will I depend on to make me happy? If I don't think that happiness is out there, not here, then where will I go if I find out it's not out there? That's the dilemma that people are experiencing, without realizing that all you have to do is not know the answer to that, right? And you're in the world of all possibility. See, where you want to get to is that the awareness is always uninterrupted. It's not just a gap. The gap between thoughts is just a place to begin to see it, begin to witness it, come into contact with it, right? But the next step is to understand it's always that way. It's not a gap between thoughts. Thoughts are the breakup. The thoughts are breaking it up. But the awareness is constant. When you start throwing in these Sanskrit words like samadhi and achievement, there's nothing to achieve. So I have a problem with that. I don't think that a lot of these terms are very helpful. Because when you talk about samadhi, then people have this idea, oh, I want that. That's something, how will I know if I'm there? I want to get there. It's the only realistic way of understanding reality, in my opinion, is for you to accept the fact that you're already there. Any attempt that you make to become what you are is a misunderstanding. And yet you have no choice but to do that. Isn't that interesting? You have no choice. You have no choice. Because given the orientation that you're in, right, when you hear the truth, right, the first thing that comes up for you is that's not where I am. Isn't it? First thing that comes up for you is that's not where I am. I want that, but that's not where I am, right? And without realizing it, that's the barrier. That's the very barrier to experiencing, the truth, is to think that you're not. The only barrier the only barrier to being enlightened is to think that you're not. Can it be that simple? None of the questions can be answered conceptually. That's one of the things I said to the fellow that I was working with today. I said, you're trying to make your life work as a concept. Your life is not a concept, so it's never going to work. The truth is all there is, and the truth is what's happening. And what is what's happening? Consciousness. And it's ever changing. It's ever changing. It was, and David said this. This whole thing was set in motion, but once it's set in motion, the laws that govern manifestation say that it only can happen as a cause and effect process. So God or the source set this in motion, but once it's set in motion, the laws that govern it take place that determine how it works.
Yeah, and he said, don't say Big Bang.
That's ignorant. It is ignorant. It is. Anybody that believes in the Big Bang is just believing something ignorant. Even if you're an acclaimed physicist and you talk about the Big Bang theory, you're just being ignorant. And Donald Hoffman is an exception to the rule. He doesn't talk like that. I mean, the obvious reality is, even if you accept the idea that the Big Bang was the beginning, any normal person with curiosity would say, yeah, but what happened before that? Any normal person would say that, right? And that's what's not being addressed. So, the Big Bang theory is just giving cookies for the mind. It's giving candy for the mind. That's all, just to keep people happy so they can pay attention to making more money. I mean, when you look at what the teachings tell us in terms of the gates to consciousness uses these gates to create reality, right? And when you look at that, and then you talk about it in terms of these materialistic scientists that believe that it really is out there, right? You can't talk them out of that. When you talk to scientists about those scientists, they say they have to die. They have to die out. They're never going to give it up.
Flat earthers.
Yeah, because if your whole life has been committed and dedicated to a certain reality, you're not going to let go of that very easily. That's why personalities are so stubborn, right? Because if I face the truth about me as a personality in terms of that personality is not actually real, but I've lived my life as if it is, and I did all these things that what I would have done differently if I had known what I know now. If you make yourself available, see, this is the thing, this is the way people have it figured out is I am going to get from where I am as a personality to the experience of my true nature, which is awareness itself, right? That'll never happen and that'll never work. And that's the exact path that people come up with, right? In reality, what the truth is, if you just sit still and be quiet and relax the body and calm the mind, it'll come to you. Because it's already there. It's already there, You're busy, that's why you're not seeing it, because you're busy still in the other realm. You're still busy thinking in the time-space reality about it. And it's not there. But if you sit still and allow yourself to be outside of time and space, right, just by focusing your attention on the body breathing, once you get outside of time and space, it's there. Yeah, that's the famous Ramana Maharshi saying, there's a presupposed non-existent self that seeks freedom for that non-existent self. So that's the process that's not going to go anywhere. The process can't go anywhere if the personality, and it's inevitable. The personality will try to become what it already is. It's inevitable. And the whole process is a process of wearing out that process. Wearing out that process. If you go to a retreat, you sit down in the retreat in the first day of meditation, and you're going to meditate 8 or 9 times today, right? You sit down for the first meditation, and the mind says, "Oh, I'm familiar with this. We've done this before. I can do this. I can do this for a little bit." Then after about the 3rd or 4th meditation in the same day, the mind's saying, "What the hell's going on? What the hell's going on?" And then you start having body pains, then the body starts resisting, then the knees start to hurt, then the legs fall asleep. Then the mind's talking to you, "How many days? 7? This is only the first day? Oh shit." But see, if you understand the process, you're sitting there being still, being silent, right? Sitting it out, letting this wear itself out, letting this process wear itself out, right? And by the 3rd or 4th day, right, it's kind of like, oh, okay. It starts to give in. It starts to surrender. It starts to recognize that you're not going to die. See, that's how the system is programmed, that if you move attention away from the mental activity, right, that you'll die. Because you are the mental activity, right? But if you go to a retreat and you sit there day after day for 8 or 9 sessions and walking meditation and no social contact, right? And less sleep than you normally get, right? By 3 or 4 or 5 days down the road, right? The voice in your head, gives up. It's like, well, it doesn't look like we're going to die, so what the hell? So then you start to experience quiet, just quiet. And when it's quiet, you're more available to reality. You're more available to enjoy what's happening instead of just be in this little narrow thing all the time, Like if you were driving from wherever you came to get here today, as you were driving your car, were you in a very narrow pea shooter brain experience of the car in front of me and he's not going fast enough and the car behind me is beeping their horn? See, if you're in that world, all the rest of the universe is out of your sight. That's what I mean by don't miss your life. Because if you're in that little world, right, there's a sky above you, there's things happening all around you, but you don't see any of that because you're surviving your way to where you're going. So by relaxing and practicing meditation, you start to become more present, so that when you're driving your car, you're aware that there's a world here, not just the cars in front of you. Right? So when you're stuck in traffic, instead of being in your head bitching, you can say, oh, what else is going on? See what I'm saying? And when you do that, then you realize that this isn't so bad to be in traffic. Every time the car stops, I have a chance to look around. Or it's like David said, when he said that he lost his taste. He said, now I don't have to worry about, what's for dinner. So you got to be awake to have that view. Most people would be, oh, I lost my taste. I love it when he does that, right? And he says, when people happening, what's happening, and people, all they do is, cry and whine. Oh, it's so terrible. That's because they don't know the difference between their mind and what they consider the world to be. Because they're only talking about their own mind, right? And while it may be the case that you don't have the ability to have control over the entire universe or the entire world, since that's only appearing in your mind where you do have control, you can train the mind to go sane. And stop being in that position where it's little me against the world. That's a mental condition, right? You can train the mind to wake up and go sane. And if you train the mind to wake up and go sane, you'll discover that it can be a good friend. Your mind can be very powerful. It can do incredible things, right? But first you have to get it. You have to get the energy that it's wasting doing all the things that don't make any difference. You have to get that energy back, so you can use it to do things that do make a difference.